Tekken 7 is a fighting game released by Bandai Namco in 2015, initially only in the arcade, but making its way to the home consoles in 2017. It's a pretty good fighting game if I do say so myself, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. Because shortly after its release on home systems, they released the Ultimate Tekken Bowl plus additional costumes DLC. Crucially, this saw the addition of some bowling minigames. Now, according to 66% of Steam users who gave this DLC a negative rating, this mode is not worth the 16CAD asking price. Let's look at a few reviews. User Alomowski said, "Remember when this mode was free in Tekken Tag Tournament and Tekken 5? I do." Well, maybe if you'd gotten a job in the 18 years since Tekken Tag Tournament came out, this wouldn't have been much of a big deal. User Iske said, "They're selling this for £12 for what gives you 5 minutes of entertainment. There's so little effort put into it that it's actually kind of impressive this wasn't some mod they decided to make a DLC. It's genuinely that bad." Well, this extremely condensed video is longer than 5 minutes, mate. Sounds to me like you just have the attention span of a goldfish. Finally, user Risco said, "Do not try to become a Tekken bowling god. This is hell. Also, I will be mad if I see another bowling god. I've worked too hard for this title. You will end up playing Tekken bowling for hours when you could have been getting good at the real game." Huh. Well, you might be asking, why on earth is this video so long? Well, I've only got one thing to say to you.
Sharp and sit the head down. And don't ask me for shit, okay?
Alright, so what is a Tekken Bowling God Prime? And why does it matter? Well, it's a player title you get for reaching frame 50 in the Strikers game mode. There is also just the regular Tekken Bowling God, but you only need to reach frame 25 to get that one. Anyway, after unlocking this title, you can put it next to your name so that you can flex on lesser gamers when you fight against them online. Something I will never actually do, because if you didn't notice from my B-roll footage, I'm kind of ass. Now, what strikers I hear you asking? Strikers is a survival mode of sorts. You start with 5 balls and must get strikes on each throw, else you lose a ball. You aren't just stuck with those first 5 balls though, as you are occasionally presented with opportunities to gain more. Most frames you'll just be up against normal pins, but at set intervals you'll be presented with either Heihachi pins or splits. Getting a strike or a split conversion on these frames gives you an extra ball to work with. Now, Heihachi pins are much more lenient than regular pins, but the splits on the other hand generally get more and more of a pain in the ass to convert the further you make it. In Strikers, there are 50 frames total, with each completed frame providing you with 100,000 Gs, the game's in-game currency. So, other than just being a fun pastime, it makes this an extremely lucrative minigame. Definitely makes it easier to purchase the character customization items so you can do more of this. Now, let's get into how the bowling works. The general mechanics are pretty simple. You pick a character, and change their outfit if you want. You line up your throw, left or right. Choose the angle of your throw. Select the strength of your spin, and select your power. There are some intricacies to these mechanics though. First of all, each character has 2 stats, one for spin and one for power. Spin relates to the amount of spin your character can put on the ball and has an effect on the speed in which the spin gauge moves back and forth. Characters also have a handedness, which determines the bias on their spin gauge and thus the max spin in each direction they can add. Power relates to the max speed at which you can throw the ball. How fast you can throw the ball generally dictates how fast the power meter moves up and down, and also how fast the spin gauge goes back and forth. Power also dictates the size of the perfect throw region, indicated by the little arrows at the top of the bar. A higher power stat gives you a smaller area, and vice versa. Get your power in this area, and you'll get a much more powerful throw, with a speed bonus depending on your power stat. Finally, power generally dictates the length of the aiming arrow. Now, there is one last aspect to the bowling, and it is by far one of the worst mechanics I have ever seen in a bowling game. If you have the audacity to time your power such that you get it perfectly at the top of the power bar, sorry pal, that's an instant foul for you as your character throws themselves down the lane. Nothing worse than getting this on your very last ball. With all this said, let's just get into some attempts. When I first started recording attempts, I had already played a bit of the game mode trying to beat it, but mainly played the regular bowling mode. During that time, I'd landed on Marduk as my quote-unquote bowling main. In terms of stats, Marduk is a powerhouse with S+ power, but has a low spin stat of C. In general though, I thought that Marduk would be pretty good for this. Surely if I can get a good score with Marduk in regular 10-frame bowling, I could do the same with him for strikers. My first attempts were mostly me trying to get more consistent at getting strikes and spares. It was slow going too. As a good deal into the challenge, I was only really making it to around the 13th frame on average. As I played, I did start getting some better scores with some low to mid 20s games, and I reached my peak Marduk performance with a 34 frame game at around the 10.5 hour mark.
I'm number one.
I'm skipping over a lot, I know, but trust me, most of those attempts were uneventful. Anyway, this game started out pretty good. I missed the first strike, but proceeded to get 8 strikes in a row, including one lucky split conversion. This gave me a good reserve of 8 balls to work with. The streak was then broken by a missed strike and an absolutely terrible conversion attempt on a 3-7 split. Though I was immediately back into it with a 9-strike streak, including another lucky split conversion. Things then got a little dicey as I got an overcharged, 2 unlucky misses, another overcharged, and another miss. I somehow managed to get the game back on its feet with a good spread eagle conversion. This is especially good considering I'd only seen it a few times before. I don't think I ever converted it again either. But just when I thought things were finally starting to look good after getting another 4 strikes in a row, the big 3 split appeared. This was my first time seeing it, and as you can see, it didn't go that well. This was followed by some really unfortunate pin action, and another goddamn overcharged. I was probably well and truly tilted at this point, just as I had to face another split I'd never seen with my final ball. The split isn't even that bad, honestly, it's just a bad throw. Anyway, after having such a good game fall apart so quickly, I knew I had to start trying something else. Having been doing attempts for roughly 11 hours total at this point, and only making it 2/3 of the way through the game, I decided that I should try playing a different character, especially now that I was a bit better. Earlier on in the challenge, I had briefly played some of their characters, but only played most of them for at most a few games. It's not even like the games I played with other characters were all that bad. I did have some really bad attempts with Xiaoyu and Noctis though, ending with 5 frames each. This basically turned me off of them immediately, even though the fault definitely lay with me. I did find some success when I played 2 games as Julia, and was able to get my 3rd best attempt up to that point on my 2nd go. I then immediately switched from her and didn't play her again until 11 hours later, for some reason. Apart from Julia, I had my most success playing Jack 7, where, in the 1.5 hour stint I had playing him, I managed to get 2 25 frame games, my best games up to that point, and a few other high teens and low 20s scores. Like Marduk, Jack 7 is a power-focused character. With a power stat of S, you would think that he'd be less powerful than Marduk. However, for some reason this isn't the case. His regular throws are only slightly faster, but his power throws add on an extra 5 kph. As I explained before, this does come at the expense of the speed of his power bar and spin gauge. As consolation, you do get this extremely over-the-top aiming reticle that you get when changing your shot angle, though this is something that all of the robot or cyborg characters have, coming in a different form for each of them. That aside, Jack's biggest problem is something that you might have noticed: his spin gauge. Due to his high throwing speed and low spin stat of C, it moves much faster than Marduk's does, making it way harder to time the right spin. Like with Marduk, getting the wrong spin isn't too bad so long as your power is good, However, despite my success with him, the unruly nature of his power bar and spin gauge are the reasons I stopped playing him. During my experimentation, I even tried playing as Marduk in his alternate costume, swapping his regular green clothes for some fresh red threads. Contrary to what many people say online about the abilities of a character in green clothes versus red clothes, my average score was actually slightly worse. Coming back to the present, I must have come to the realization that I was blinded by power, and that maybe I needed to start playing a more balanced character. As such, I decided to play a few rounds as Geese. It seems that I had some success with him before I started doing recorded attempts, as I already had a best score in the range of 24 to 25 frames. He has an S power stat just like Jack, but unlike Jack, he is actually less powerful than Marduk. However, with a spin stat of B, his spin gauge is far easier to control. Getting started with Geese, I immediately got a 20 frame game. The very next game, I managed to get my second best attempt with a 32 frame game. It wasn't as clean as my 34 frame Marduk game, with many more missed throws and unlucky pin action, but it was very promising. And while not as good, my scores from the next few games were consistent enough to make me really start rethinking my approach to the game. My success with Geese prompted me to try an even more balanced character. That's where Kazuya came in. With power and spin stats of A, he's a perfect all-rounder. There is another character with AA stats, but Kazuya's got drip. Either way, I started my Kazuya games off pretty good with a 23 frame game right off the bat. My next game wasn't that great, but I then got another 23 frame game. It was obvious I was in a bit of a groove because I soon found myself on a very good run. You see, at some point in time, I was finally able to put a name to something I'd been doing somewhat intuitively before. This was the concept of the pocket. For those that don't know, the pocket is a sweet spot between either pins 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, depending on your handedness. Getting a well-placed throw in this spot gives you a very good chance of getting a strike. Now, it's not like I was doing this technique exactly as you're supposed to, as right-handed bowlers like Kazuya are supposed to aim for the 1-3 pocket, but I always aim for the 1-2. But these characters aren't perfect simulations of real bowlers. They can get good spin control, even throwing in non-biomechanically intuitive ways, so long as I'm able to click at the right time. Anyway, I found it better to throw as such because the spin gauge doesn't move all the way to the far end on the side of their dominant hand. This makes it far less likely for you to overshoot by an extreme margin if you mess up the timing. Knowing about the pocket technique really allowed me to start being more consistent. I was able to find a pretty good lineup, basically guaranteeing a strike so long as my power and spin were pretty good. Now, while in theory I knew how to get a strike, in practice, I didn't have my timings down perfectly with Kazuya yet. Still, I was hitting the frames that mattered, allowing me to extend my run further despite missing some throws. Luck seemed to be on my side as well, as forgiving pin action was allowing me strikes that I probably shouldn't have got. I did have my unlucky moments though, including on what I thought was the perfect lineup for a spread eagle conversion. I'd sort of lost the plot for a bit leading up to this point, but was soon able to recover and get a streak going. This streak should have ended after this absolutely terrible conversion attempt on a washout 3, but thanks to what must have been a gift from Harada himself, the streak was able to continue. I soon found myself in unknown territory with a split I hadn't seen before, the washout 5. An okay conversion attempt was thwarted by what surely must have been a weighted pin. After restoring a ball with a strike on some Heihachi pins, my arch nemesis, the 7 pin, decided to dodge the rest of the pins as it likes to do. Then I was presented with another new split, the Cincinnati split. While not as hard as its cousin, the 7-10 split, it's still hard to convert. But obviously, I, with my tens of hours of Tekken bowling experience, would have no problem with this. Following that whiffed throw and another weighted pin screwing me over, life was breathed back into my run after a good strike. This new life was then immediately knocked right back out after I was presented with another new split, the Big 4. This would mark the end of this really good run, as a little too much spin saw me hit only 1 of 4 pins. After this run, and getting so close, I decided to fully broaden my horizons. I proceeded to play at least a couple games with almost every character, just to make sure I wasn't missing out on anything. I'll save you the trouble, and just tell you that this ended up not amounting to much, with my best attempts being the low 30s and only a few games even cracking 20. Even playing as Fung, the only other AA stat character, I didn't have that much success. So, after 4 hours of playing other characters, I knew what I had to do. After switching back to Kazuya, I was immediately getting higher scores more frequently. After a 34 frame game almost right off the bat and a 30 soon after, I capped off my first hour back as Kazuya with a 39 frame game. I did proceed to enter a bit of a slump though, only cracking 30 frames 4 times in an equal number of hours. I was soon back on my feet and on a bit of a streak though, getting a 32 frame game, followed by a 33 frame game, a 34 frame game, and then a run entering frame 35. Now, as you can see by how few balls I have remaining, this run hadn't started off that well. In fact, I hadn't converted a single split up until that point. Getting a few more strikes on regular and Heihachi pins was able to keep me going for a bit, but my continued inability to convert any splits proved to be my downfall, ending the run with 42 frames. I'd again gotten so close to 50 frames, and I was just short of a new PB, but after failing again after getting so close, I decided to take a short break. Coming back with a full stomach and my previous loss fresh on my mind, my next few attempts were only good at best. But then I found myself in PB territory. Rewinding a little bit to the start of this run, it started off pretty good. I was getting strikes on every frame up until this absolute whiff on frame 10. Now, this was the start of a reoccurring theme for this run. I just couldn't get it up. The power bar, that is. My timing would just be off sometimes, resulting in the power bar stopping just a bit short of the extra power zone. After this frame, things were slightly rocky, but I was holding on. I had some lucky and unlucky shots, as the pin action giveth, but also taketh away. I had another pretty bad conversion attempt on the spread eagle split on frame 25, but I do stand by this shot angle. A little less power and it might have worked. Things were starting to look good after this though, with what looked to be the start of a strike streak. Then this happened. I don't even want to talk about it. Luckily, and when it mattered, I managed to redeem myself with this nice conversion on the big 3 split on frame 30. The next dozen frames were a bit of a roller coaster. Some good throws, or more accurately, successful throws, and some bad throws. Included in the bad are some more absolutely terrible split conversion attempts. I'll just chalk the bad throws up to poor pin action though, rather than my continued inability to time the power bar correctly. I managed to start the final 10 frames with a minor victory, getting my first conversion of the Cincinnati split. After getting a strike on the next frame, this brings us back to where we were a couple of minutes ago. Things had been hard fought up to this point, evident by the mere 4 balls I had remaining, but after the last 2 frames, I was feeling pretty good. I just had to play well in these last few frames and make sure to convert or strike any split or Heihachi pins I saw. Facing again the big 4 split that I failed to convert in my last PB, I had a better idea of the angle I should use for my throw. I just needed the right power. Then this happened. Watching that ball roll into the gutter was, well, gutting. With so few balls remaining, I couldn't afford to make these mistakes. Luckily, I was thrown a bone for the next 2 frames. Simple, regular pin setups that I was easily able to strike. But then, I faced another difficult split. The Greek Church. Honestly, I don't even know why I attempted a shot like this. I'm pretty sure I was trying to hit the pins like this, but it would have been way safer to go from a straighter angle, but I digress. Anyway, at this point I had 1 ball left, and 4 frames to go. Now, every shot was crucial. A nice solid strike on some regular pins brought me to a set of Heihachi pins. It wasn't even a matter of wanting to get the extra ball. I just needed to get this strike. And despite a somewhat worrying power level, I managed to get it. With a bit of a cushion now, coming up to the last couple frames, I was feeling good. But then, there it was. The 7-10 split. Being able to convert this would surely guarantee my victory, but despite an okay attempt, it wasn't meant to be. This put me in a really weird spot. I'd made it to frame 50, but there was still one last set of pins. Had I really already won? Or did I need to survive this last frame? With one ball remaining, I couldn't really take any risks. All I needed was one more routine strike, like I'd done many times before in the 24 hours leading up to this. The angle was good, and even the power was good. I watched as the ball rolled down the alley. Devastation. That's all I could feel as I processed what just happened. At the final moment, I squandered it. But was that really my fault? Or had the Tekken bowling gods decided to screw me over? The throw looked good, and I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for that meddling pin action. But all I could really do now was exit from the game mode and see if that run was all for naught. I'd done it. I'd gotten the title. Though it was a bittersweet victory, as I didn't feel like I'd entirely earned it. I definitely didn't feel like the kind of run that should have won. Looking back at it, it almost looks as if I was throwing on purpose just to make for a better story. Anyway, was it worth it? Probably not. That said, on top of getting the title, I did make tons of in-game money. But most importantly, even if it wasn't worth all of the hours I put in, at least now I can go and play online with the assurance that even if, or rather when, I lose, I'll know I'm still a better bowler than my opponents are. That's all that really matters. And if they also have the Tekken Bowling God Prime tag, I can rest easy knowing that they probably have no life. Now, if you got this far, thanks for watching. Don't really know what else to say other than why the hell did you watch an entire video about a guy playing a bowling minigame in a fighting game, but hey, I'm probably guilty of doing something like that too. Anyway, to wrap up the bowling game that this video is, I'll end with a nice bonus round of some of my luckiest and unluckiest throws throughout my attempts. See you in another 2 years when I post my next video to this channel. Maybe it'll be about whatever this Tekken Ball game mode is.